This is Huffpost Live. I'm Josh Zepps. Today's a bittersweet day for those like me whose passion for comedy and television was first stoked by the cool comic intellect of David Letterman. After more than 30 years, 20,000 guests and 5,600 top 10 lists, the longest-serving late-night host in history will step down tonight. To celebrate his legacy, we'll be joined by some of Dave's colleagues, peers, staffers and critics. To kick us off, I'm joined by one of the other great living television talk show hosts, Dick Cavett. Dick, thanks for being here. Can you share with us your thoughts, what impact Dave has had on the genre?
Well, I have to admit to being rather sad about David's going off. I've Letterman shows of going all the way back to the old one. And I will miss him. I hope he's going to have a good time being off for a while. He certainly deserves that. And I hate to see it. An era has ended. Certainly, it's an era that lasted even longer than the old Samurai record. Johnny Carson. He beat the boss by 3 years.
Dick, your audio isn't fantastic. I'm going to get you on a phone line, even though I can see you pretty well. You're sort of cracking up at every other word. So let's bring in some
Okay,
people.
I could stand hearing you better.
Okay, good. Yes, we'll get you on a phone line, and we'll sort that out. Let's bring in a couple of people who have worked on Letterman's show. He inspired the careers of many comedians and comedy writers, of course. Two people who've worked with him are Eric Kaplan and John Hotchkiss. Thanks, guys, for being with us. John, you joined the show back in the NBC days. What was it like?
Well, I didn't actually work on the show. I worked next to the show. I was a page at NBC in 1989 and 1990. And so amongst my jobs at the time was seating the audiences for late night. And then also I had a very important job many nights, which was standing outside of Dave's dressing room, answering a telephone and handing him a key to his dressing room. And it was the best time of my life because I realized that I was getting to watch this thing and learn this thing that I was interested in. And here was a guy who had the same world outlook that I did. And I was getting a front row seat at learning all of that.
What were some of your favorite moments? You got to be on the show, right?
Well, yes, I was in a couple of sketches. I don't know why, but somehow I got tapped to be in, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 different sketches, one with Chris Elliott, one with Fred Savage. But the things that I was in don't pale in comparison to the things about the show that I genuinely loved, which was the anarchy of the show, which was the subversiveness, throwing things off tall buildings, putting cameras on monkeys. Those are the kinds of things that spoke to me in a language that I hadn't yet heard on television.
Yeah, I believe we've got Dick Cavett back on the phone now. So, Dick, just jump in. Our viewers comment as they watch this online, as always. And I've got one comment here from Ryan Buxton, who actually works here at HuffPost, saying, Dick, can you talk a little about your personal relationship with Letterman? What's your take on his legendary aloofness? And what do you think he'll do after retiring?
Well, our legendary feud never existed. I'm glad to say that. I think we liked each other from the beginning, and I go all the way back to a legendary appearance on his earlier show where I presented, to everyone's surprise, Eddie Murphy with a tube of Darky toothpaste, a racist product sold up to that time still in Asia and America. Anyway, and David handled that brilliantly. We had a lot of fun with that. I have jogged in the park with David. We attended a disastrous World's Fair together. We were part of the New Orleans World's Fair Bob Hope special. The special wasn't a disaster, the fair was. And we've always been quite cordial.
Another comment coming through for you from Brian Mednick. Dick, one of your more memorable appearances on Dave was with your pal Eddie Murphy. Do you and Eddie still keep in touch?
Sadly, no. I've got to get in touch with Eddie because I was given a number of his lawyer, who is one of those lawyers who doesn't return messages. So, but my goal is to get back in touch with Eddie. It's been too long.
Dick, getting back to the early days of late night as a format, obviously Letterman was influenced by Johnny Carson, but his NBC show also inherited part of its kind of offbeat sensibility from the first host of The Tonight Show, Steve Allen, whose manic comedy had animals and puppets and singing, and he would leave the studio along with all the predictable stuff like a monologue and interviews. Do you have a sense of how Allen would sort of set up the modern talk show?
I think it did in several ways, and some of it is directly seen, I think, in David, whether David actually studied Steve Allen and was influenced and admiring of him, I don't know. But there is that wonderful sense in David's work of the Allen. It's a quality I think is essential to long-term, and I would call it a sense of danger. That if you can instill that in the viewer the way Jack Paar did, where you never knew what he might say or do next. One British critic said you can't take your eyes off Jack even if there's another guest on the screen because you might miss a live nervous breakdown on your home screen. David didn't seem to come apart ever, but that sense of what he might do or say, the criticism he got for being insulting, I always thought the insults were deftly delivered and richly deserved.
Right.
Especially when one of his targets was that boring, yearly snooze called the Oscar show.
I mean, I think, Dick, also the thing about Dave is that his insults and his barbs always take place beneath a veneer of congenial Midwestern affability, in a way, right? I mean, he's never, to my ear, directly insulting. It's always underneath a kind of an almost like he's playing the role of a talk show host rather than actually being a talk show host.
That's a very good point. I wish I had made it. So I will from now on. Yes, he always had. Well, early in the days, they used to call him sort of that hayseed or rustic Midwestern innocent clownish face, and it's a wonderful face. But yeah, he was able to do it from behind. To do those things that he was criticized for and the dummies didn't get, behind a wonderful mask of innocence. And I think that's what made it effective for those who dug it, among whom I was one.
Did he influence your style at all? I mean, while Carson was sort of the god of Hollywood and everything was so slick, when Letterman then came on the air, he was almost doing an anti-talk show, right? I mean, he was really screwing around with the genre. What did you make of that at the time?
I like that. I thought it sort of deserved some screwing around with. It could be pretty tired just having a desk and a couch and people saying, my new film is so exciting, and I had an exciting director and an exciting Barcalounger in my trailer, and I want to thank my exciting masseur. I did see a girl who would come on with a dreary film clip and be excited through heavy-lidded eyebrows. And David's attitude, it wasn't so much ever what he said, but his attitude and his looks were priceless. And I'm sure some of them were stunned when they got home, saw themselves with David, and saw what he had done to them.
Dick, sit tight and feel free to jump into the conversation whenever you want to, as I meander through our various guests. But Eric,
I always do.
Good. Eric Kaplan, you wrote for Letterman. What was the experience like?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I came into late night writing for Dave from having been a professional philosopher. And I found it quite interesting because the first day I was there, I wrote a piece, and the piece was about Rupert G. making Dave dance like a dog. And he said, put on this dog mask and dance for TV. And there were all these professional choreographers there figuring out this ridiculous dance like this. And then I saw Dave for the first time. And for me, it was the experience a little bit of like seeing a lion, which is something that you usually see in nature shows. But there he was, but he's a person there. He was, and he looked so different. And it was sort of like Mr. Cavett said, there was a dangerous quality. That's true, because it's this fake relationship you have with something that you don't really know. And then there it was in person. And I found that quite exciting, much more exciting than philosophy. At one point, he gave me a call and he said, what's the word for what the sky looks like at dusk? Because I've come across this word and I've forgotten it. So I hung up the phone, and then a couple minutes later, it came to me. Should we let the viewers write in, or should I just say?
Just give it to us.
Crepuscular. So I said to Dave, it's crepuscular. So I like that about Dave because he had a kind of interest in language.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question? Oh, sorry.
Please, jump in, Dick.
Did he ever say to you, go easy on the Descartes and Socrates jokes as a philosopher?
I'm glad he didn't. I would have been offended.
I mean,
why would he put down these notable figures from the past? I don't know. But he never did. He never did.
Eric, that's one of the interesting things about I think what Dave was doing in the early days, and why a lot of some of my younger staff here say, "What's the big deal?" Because I don't really watch Dave, and they're too young to know. But it's precisely his sort of almost quasi-philosophical subversion of the entire genre in those early days, which shook things up so much in late night. I want to take a look. Obviously, John was just mentioning like the Alka-Seltzer moment. This is when Letterman sort of revolutionized the format with one wacky stunt, among them being the donning of a suit of Alka-Seltzer tablets to see what happens when he's dunked in a vat of water. Look at this.
And of course you have the hoist, but please don't try this at home. How much time do we have? 45 seconds. Boy, if I die, this is the worst possible way to go, isn't it?
Dick Cavett, that is not Johnny. That is not your grandfather's talk show.
No, and David, if you're watching, one more year and you'd have gone too far.
I want to take a look at another clip from those early days of late night when Dave pioneered an invaluable television technology, late night monkey cam.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, for the first time anywhere, the late night monkey cam mobile unit, Zippy. Paul? Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's easy to see that this technology has limitless applications.
Limitless applications. Dick, did all that mad, crazy stuff matter?
Say again, mad, crazy stuff?
Did it matter?
Well, I think well, for one thing, you never saw the late Walter Cronkite do anything quite like that. And I think that David took great delight, if I haven't slid off your question, in breaking the traditions, even the traditions of something as unrehearsed as a Tonight Show, and just going to the outer limits, and sometimes, if you can go beyond them, he did. I seem to have a hell of a lot of fun out of it. Certainly gave me a lot of fun. And even in his so-called cranky periods, he retains the same wit and the same sharp edge and the same entertainment value for me that he always did.
Yeah, and of course, then the show had to change a bit when it moved to 11:35, when he left NBC. So Johnny Carson, for those who don't recall, left NBC. It was anticipated that presumably Letterman would fill the Tonight Show seat. Obviously, that went to Jay Leno instead. Dave moved to CBS, which rolled out the red carpet for him. And one of Dave's own favourite comics and a regular on his show, appearing 40 times, is Andy Kindler, who joins me now. Andy, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell Dick Cavett that I have a Descartes joke. And the Descartes joke is, I believe it was the great philosopher Descartes who said, "I think, therefore am I right, ladies?"
You're right, of course. Guys, yes, don't let anybody try to correct you on that. By the way, a host should never apologize for explaining who Johnny Carson was. As you just this year I have had two big shocks. I've been asked by an adult, who were the Marx Brothers and who was Johnny Carson?
Oh, man.
I pity
So don't
you.
let that shake you up, David.
Horrifying. Andy, when I was a young person in Australia, I remember turning on Dave for the first time and being quite electrified. And in those early days, I believe I saw you do stand up on his show several times and do some outside bits where he would send you out and then you'd sit on the couch and you two would banter. What was your experience like in the early days working with Dave?
Well, for people of my generation, 25 to 35. Dave was our hero. I mean, I love Johnny Carson, and I grew up watching Dick Cavett. I mean, Dick Cavett interviewing Marlon Brando might be the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That was my dream, was to be on the show. And so 1996, I got to be on the show. And unlike Roseanne, whose first time on the Tonight Show was great, my first time I thought I bombed. And I think I wasn't ready, and I went back on the show in 2000, and my first line was that I was here 4 years ago, I'm here again tonight, and I can't live on this kind of money. But the thing that you guys were talking about before is the whole idea of him being a curmudgeon. I love that Dave shows his true personality, just like about a few months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, not that he's always angry, but now that we live in the age of Jimmy Fallon, where everything is great, so great, so great, 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 and also Leno was Mr. Nice Guy. To me, that's what I loved about Dave. I mean, he did this thing a few months ago they used to do all the time, where he sprays people with water on the street, and he said to them, "Now go to 42nd Street and get the hell out of here." So to me, that's exactly the kind of comedy I want to hear. And for me, it was an unbelievable dream come true, because I did the show a few times. Then 2005, I had one of those nights where the crowd got me. Everybody, I mean, I have footage of this, so I'm not lying. And it was because of David Letterman that I started doing field pieces, because he really couldn't do field pieces much anymore because he would get mobbed. And so, I mean, to me, it was such an incredible honor. And so many, every time I would go out and see him, and my favorite, he would, and also he would say things to me, like once we're watching this video I did, and I said, "Hey Dave, how you feeling?" He says, "I could drop dead any minute."
How did you feel, Andy, having him essentially as a fan? I mean, there are very few people who I see on the show for whom he has such obvious respect and affinity as when you're on.
It means so much. First of all, I'm standing near Paul, so every time Paul laughs, it's amazing. If I hear Dave, I don't even care if I'm imagining it, but I hear him laugh, that's all I need. And I did this joke on my last appearance, where I said, when they were giving tours of the Titanic, did they ever say things like, "Here's the world's largest dance hall, here's a bowling alley," and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so he walks over saying, "Tip of the iceberg," and that's all you need.
Yeah.
Or he'll say about me, "Andy Kindler, he's combustible."
There you go.
I don't want to say I have a shrine at home, but I do have a shrine at home. To me, he's my hero and truly subversive. You know, people use the word subversive for when people are trying to be edgy. He was never trying. His commenting, deconstructing, making fun of the bit itself, that to me was true subversion. I don't think he invented it, but I think he perfected it.
Right. I mean, that's something that the two of you have in common as well, because a lot of your material is about subverting the material that you're doing too, and being self-referential and so on. He's also, as well as being subversive, I think irreverent in the truest sense of the word. I mean, lacking a reverence for anything, which is, again, one of those words that gets bandied around and thrown about, but I think in his case is really apt. I want to take a look at some of his subversion here. This is probably the first moment that I realized that I was in love with David Letterman, when he was interviewing Madonna, and she started dropping the F-bomb a lot on the show, and the way he responded was iconic. Take a look.
Listen, all you do is talk about my sex life on your show, so now you don't want to talk about my sex life when I'm on your show.
No, what do you mean? Do you mean because we refer to you periodically, we make jokes?
Periodically?
Yeah.
You can't get through a show without talking about me, or thinking about me.
But do you mind that? Is that a problem for you?
It's never a problem.
Yeah. All right, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's do a commercial. You want to do a commercial?
No.
Okay, we'll do a commercial
I don't think
and
we
then...
should ever cut to a commercial.
No,
Let's just keep talking and film every second of it.
Oh, yeah, because if the rest of it is as fascinating as the first part of it, then we've got something there. That's money in the bank there.
Wait. Before we cut to a commercial, I just want to know, is that a rug?
You You're talking about my hair. All right, what is that, a swim cap? What are you wearing? Come on, let's go. Here we go.
Dick Cavett, he's not just a funny guy, he listens carefully and he's capable of those incredible exchanges of repartee. He's an interviewer.
Absolutely. Hey, his best ad libs rank with anybody's, starting with Groucho at the top on down. And by the way, Madonna's starting to look like my old Sunday school teacher. I don't know what that has to do with anything.
I don't know, Dick.
But
that was probably 20 years ago. She probably looks more like your old Sunday school teacher now.
Yeah, well, I see her all the time on the street. But anyway, that's another great thing that I would probably watch once a year was his treatment of John McCain for 20 minutes, it seemed like, for canceling on him, claiming he was running to an airplane to go to Washington to save the country, and then they cut to John McCain being, how they got, I don't know, being made up for one or two other television shows. and he put John McCain away, as he deserved, for various reasons, including you don't cancel at the last minute, and you don't use a woman as your vice president who seems to have no first language.
Yeah, this was during the financial crisis, just to give people some context on that. And McCain cancelled, saying that he had to rush off and suspend his campaign. He had to go to the airport. And I remember Letterman saying, "I got a question for you, Mr. McCain. You need a ride to the airport?" As Letterman has left an imprint on late night, his predecessors are now, of course, paving their way. I want to talk a little bit about the future of late night. So we're joined by Time Magazine contributing editor Richard Zoglin. Richard, where do we go from here? What do you see as the future of late night?
Well, I'm not too optimistic about the future. I wrote a little piece about Letterman's departure. What bothers me is that Dave was such a great conversationalist, and there was a sense of authenticity and sort of poking through the pretensions and of the guests. And now what we see is a lot of kind of old-fashioned gush about showbiz. I think in Jimmy Fallon, James Corden a little bit. And I think that sense of distance, you're missing that sense of distance between the showbiz world that the talk show host is introducing and the host himself. I always think the best hosts are the guys who aren't part of that showbiz world, who create a little distance. I think Dick Cavett did that. Johnny did that. Even Steve Allen did that at the beginning, even though he was a talented musician. He still came across as everyman, and I think Dave does that too, and that's what I'm going to miss.
Andy, you've been.
And remember, he also had a way of keeping a topic in the news going in a way that showed not only how well informed and how intelligent and how articulate he was, but how uncliched he was. He could teach many of the news people not to ask things like, how did it feel when you found your daughter dead? Or what do you think the future holds? You know, he's really, really extraordinarily good mind.
But Dick Cavett, what do you think the future holds?
I think the future holds much of the past, a little of the present, and not enough good.
Andy, you've been banging the drum about this difference between Letterman and his successors and his competitors like Leno for years. Right. I mean, you're one of the few comics who was perfectly happy to burn all of your bridges with The Tonight Show and, speak constantly about what a hack Jay Leno is. Do we have any other Lettermans in the wings?
Well, Jay Leno has a car that runs on the energy of all the people's dreams that he's crushed. No. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Maybe, I thought that was strong. But, Kevin Eubanks, his sidekick, former Jay Leno sidekick, he sits at home and sets an alarm clock, and he laughs at nothing at regularly scheduled intervals. The irony, if that's the correct word, which I never used correctly, was that Jay Leno was at his funniest when he was on Letterman in the 80s. And everybody remembers how funny Jay was in the 80s. We mourn for that. And the entire world, the universe demanded that David Letterman take over the Tonight Show. It was just a horrible crime that he didn't get it. Although ultimately, I think ratings, all that stuff doesn't matter, and he's done, what he did at CBS, maybe it was all meant to be. The only person I really... Was that? The Earth
demanded it? I'm uncomfortable saying the whole universe demanded it.
Well, I have some knowledge. And I know some people into string theory.
Okay.
But I think the only person I'm not the only person, but if there the baton from Dave to Stephen Colbert, I am optimistic about, because Leno really dumbed down the audience, and then they were surprised that Conan had trouble, because I think Conan's hilarious. And then, but he had to overcome a guy who was walking around doing jokes like, "Hey, what's the name of the president? No, you got that wrong." So, I think Stephen Colbert will appeal to the same type of people that Letterman appeals to. So, I'm optimistic. Also, I'm available.
Yeah. Eric, what do you make of the prognosis? And I guess a little part of me, my heart sinks a bit just in terms of seeing what NBC executives, what direction they've thought they needed to go in terms of having, Seth Meyers is not that different from Jimmy Fallon, is not that different from Jay Leno. These are very talented people. They're good at telling a joke. I mean, Jimmy has all kinds of talent, but there's none of that acerbic wit. There's none of that sense of danger that Dick was talking about that you had with Dave.
Well, Andy was appealing to the wishes of the universe here. So to take a larger view, I mean, I suspect that people are stopping watching television entirely, and that's it's been good to me, but I think that does make people a little like consumers of culture rather than participants. So I would look forward to more of like festivals. Like people going outside and participating in a neighborhood comedy festival, and that might be the next thing after TV Dad goes away.
Richard, presumably, surely people are going to continue to consume televised content in some capacity. They might not sit down at 11:35 and get it from NBC, but they're going to get it from somewhere.
Right, and obviously the thing now is YouTube videos. I mean, they're creating content for videos to be go viral. But I think that sooner or later, people are going to still want that experience of sitting there with somebody. Yeah, there's less TV viewing, but I just don't think everything can be constant performances, constant sketches, how about a little authenticity? And I think the best talk show host, and it might be Stephen Colbert, I'm actually, optimistic to see what he does, will discover that quality again. That not everything is a performance. You don't bring on every guest and and play games with them. That sometimes you just talk. And I think people will always want that experience, even in the YouTube age. And I think somebody will discover that again.
John, I'd be interested to know, did you have a sense of Dave's intellect when you were working on the show? Because I think that's really one of the differentiating factors that we're talking about here, right? In order to conduct a great interview with somebody, you have to be smart.
Yes. I suppose that's true. Look, I worked for Bill Maher for 5 years. I worked for Penn and Teller for 5 years. And I spent a year writing on the first season of The Rosie O'Donnell Show. And so I've seen a lot of talk show hosts. And I would say just the thing that I lament is that first, every night, Jimmy Fallon seems to have a hot crowd. And I've never, that doesn't seem possible, right? And one of the people I used to work for, I used to say that if Hitler was a guest on that show, the two of them would talk about how much they liked German cheesecake. And I lament that so much of what late night has become is the sort of frothy kind of, hey, let's talk about your movie and then we'll break eggs on each other's head and we'll go to commercial. What Dave did was have genuine conversations with people, and they talked about interesting things. And we're going to lose that at the 11:30 time slot.
Andy, don't you have a whole bit about Fallon interviewing Stalin?
Here's my impression of Jimmy Fallon interviewing Stalin. Stalin, so great you came on the show. Great. I love your work. Great. Hey, Stalin, I heard you killed 30 million people. That's crazy. You want to play charades? After these messages, Jimmy will play hangman with someone who's actually hanged a man.
Hey, you guys are talking about my friend Jimmy Fallon, a protege of mine, and I'm going to have to leave the room.
Let me finish. Yeah. Let me finish is the old joke.
Hold on, let me finish.
Dick, one question coming in from Jacques, a comment. Dick, do you believe the night show interview style that you and Dave were so great at is disappearing. I wonder if something like your infamous Norman Mailer interview could ever happen again.
I do. I wonder. People ask me that too. There are people who say nobody does exactly what you did. Well, I don't think anybody does exactly what anybody ever did. I always set out to make the show entertaining. I didn't want to have only comedians and only show people and only authors. So the most dynamic show I ever had had 3 writers on it: Mailer, Vidal, and the great Janet Flannery. But Colbert will show you. I hate to name drop, but he is a friend of mine, and there is so much to him. He is so damn smart. And all the people going around sillily, can you say?
Sure.
Saying, oh, but if he gets out of his character, he won't know what to do. Horse crap.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
He does it on the show now. He does it on the show now. On the Colbert Show, when he would do it, when he would interview people, he would kind of drop out of the character. So I'm with Mr. Cavett on this, because I think he's bright. I think he's spiritual. I think he's unbelievably hilarious.
Yeah, he's smart, funny, and he also has heart. And as we sort of wind down, I also want to touch on that about Dave, because there's this cliche of Letterman as being, aloof and distant. But I want to show the clip of his first show back after 9/11. This was on September 17th, 2011. Obviously, 2001. Everyone was in a state of shock and a state of trauma. He had been in broadcasting from New York City, obviously, since 1982. He's a quintessential New Yorker. And take a look at what he did in his first moments back on air.
This is our first show on the air since New York and Washington were attacked, and I need to ask your patience and indulgence here, because I want to say a few things, and believe me, sadly, I'm not going to be saying anything new. And in the past week, others have said what I will be saying here tonight far more eloquently than I'm equipped to do. But if we are going to continue to do shows, I just need to hear myself talk for a couple of minutes. As I understand it, and my understanding of this is vague at best, another smaller group of people stole some airplanes and crashed them into buildings. And we're told that they were zealots fueled by religious fervor. And if you live to be 1,000 years old, will that make any sense to you? Will that make any goddamn sense?
Isn't it?
Yeah, sorry.
It's interesting that David, in saying I'm not eloquent, was quite eloquent.
Right. And Richard, this is where his broadcasting chops come out, where he's not just an interviewer and he's not just a comic. He's a person who can relate through the screen.
Sure, and he was always very authentic. He never put on characters or anything. He was always himself, even when he was playing around and having fun and making jokes and being ironic. But there was always a continuum when he talked about his heart attack, or his heart surgery, 9/11, of course. When he talked to Obama, I mean, the guy could spend a whole hour talking to the president, amazing, and be amusing, and yet never betray himself as a person. So it was an amazing talent.
So, Richard, just in terms of looking forward to the economic model that networks are all grappling with, it's been raised, the fact that obviously most of our consumption of late-night television now takes place in YouTube clips rather than people actually sitting down and watching it. Is it possible, do you think, to still bring that kind of long-form, intellectual, high-end conversation that maybe we hope Colbert will want to do, and have it be as lucrative as Jimmy Fallon lip-syncing?
It's definitely harder than it was. I'm not sure, but I do think, people also like experiencing the same thing at the same time. I mean, they all like to watch the last episode of Mad Men. Yeah, you can together. You can watch it later, but then you don't have, the communal experience. And I think the communal experience, look at the ratings for Letterman's last shows right now. And tonight's show, gosh, it's going to go through the roof. People like to experience the same thing at the same time. Even though they also obviously can get things instantly on the internet, but I don't think what Dave is doing will ever go away.
Dick, jump in.
I think Richard Zoglin is more likely to know the answer to this than I am, but there was a startling piece in the New Yorker a year or so ago about late-night television and me, but the startling line that first struck my eye was, late night is no longer the cash cow that it once was.
Yeah.
Well,
how uplifting.
Andy, wrap us up here. Do you have any final thoughts about Dave?
Well, the idea, one thing that I think, like earlier in the show, Dick Cavett gave a prime example of what people like Dave can do and what Dick Cavett can do. He said, Dick said, I wish I had said that, and I will continue to say it in the future. It's like the ability of, no matter, everybody knows that Dave's very hard on himself, but his ability to be in the moment is unmatched. And there will never be anybody like him again. That doesn't mean there won't be great people again, but his ability to be in the moment and to kind of have this view of life like, yeah, right, like this is really good. Whatever it is that he's saying, the cynicism, but not just cynicism to the point of where you can tell that deep down, he's a very optimistic, spiritual human being. We'll never see anything like it again. But the whole idea that what people want to see is this or that, they're constantly underestimating what people want to see. And if people in show business, just like the executive, just went with their heart, things would be a lot better.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andy, that presupposes the existence of a heart. Dick Cavett, do you want to sign us off here?
I want to predict, and it's totally immoral of me, how he is going to end his show tonight. He's going to bring Les Moonves out, his boss at CBS, and he's going to say, Les, it's been a long run, wonderful, and you convinced me just now backstage I'm staying on for another 10 years.
Yes!
We can only hope. We can only hope, Dick. Dick Cavett, always good to speak to you. Thanks for coming back on Huffpost.
Thank you.
Andy, thanks for making time. Eric, John, and Richard, wonderful to talk to you guys. Thanks for being with us. It's a bittersweet day, as I said at the top, but you made it that little bit better. Stay tuned, of course. Plenty more conversations coming up here on Huffpost Live.